Awesome. Okay, so we're going to call us to order. So first and foremost, we have an amendment to the agenda. So for the completion and acceptance at agenda item number 2, we need a mover and a seconder to approve the updated agenda. We have amended staff report number 2, as well as the added staff report number 9. Moved by Commissioner Collier, seconded by Commissioner Little. Any discussion? All those in favor? Excellent, so carried. Okay, so on to disclosures of any conflict of interest. Seeing none, approval of the minutes. So I need a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes from the meeting held on February 29th, 2025. Commissioner Little, seconded by Commissioner Collier. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Great, okay. So we have a communication, the first report, accessible public transit service advisory committee meeting that was held on February 11th. I need a mover and a seconder to note in file. Moved by Commissioner Roux, seconded by Commissioner Collier. All those in favor? Great. Any discussion on that? None, fantastic. Okay, so I need a mover and a seconder to consider. Consistent with the provisions of section 239 of the Municipal Act, the commission will move in camera to consider the following: advice to the subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Mover and seconder. Thank you, Commissioner Roux. Seconded by Commissioner Little. Great. So we are now back to our open session. I'm going to report progress on advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. I need a mover and a seconder to report that progress. Moved by Commissioner Collier, seconded by Commissioner Little. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor.
So I'll read the motion. So that the commission direct administration in consultation with outside counsel to prepare a step-by-step process for the approval of advertising on LTC assets in keeping with the commission's advertising policy, and report back on same at future meeting.
Great. Okay, so I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Commissioner Collier, seconded by Commissioner Madden. All those in favor? Great. Okay, so carried. Thank you. Excellent. Okay.
And travel time and prep time.
Okay. So on to our staff reports. So staff report number 1, the 2026 bus replacement and expansion. Over to you, Ms. Bush.
Thank you. This report provides a comprehensive overview of the precarious state of the bus manufacturing industry in North America and the resulting issues anticipated with respect to fleet renewal and expansion projects going forward. While a number of these issues have been impacting the sector for some time, the more recent U.S. election and tariff threats have resulted in increased pressures. As indicated in the report, CUDA has established a bus manufacturing task force, which is charged with developing a series of recommendations that are intended to alleviate some of the pressure facing the sector, giving considerations to the flexibility of funding programs, levels of customizations for bus orders, and the capacity of the manufacturing sector to meet the demand of transit in Canada. Given the sum of these challenges, administration reached out to New Flyer Industries to obtain pricing for our 2026 bus replacement and expansion programs under our current contract. As set out in the report, the pricing provided equates to an approximate 8% increase over prices paid for the 2024 and 2025 buses, which were ordered in April of 2024. The minor variances to the budget will be addressed as part of the 2026 budget program, which will be tabled for the commission consideration in August of this year. While placing the order now will ensure that 2026 replacement and expansion buses arrive in 2026, they will arrive later than required in order to implement any new service requiring expansion buses in the typical September timeframe. This will be contemplated as part of the 2026 service plan report that Katie will table later in the year, and we will include anticipated launch dates of those types of services. We'll have a better idea then on the delivery of the buses. So we will provide commentary on that when that service plan comes forward. And finally, set out in the report, there has not yet been a decision with respect to who will be purchasing the buses for rapid transit services. And as such, a copy of this report has been shared with Civic Administration to ensure that they're aware of the timelines associated with bus delivery, noting delays in ordering those rapid transit buses past the spring of this year will in all likelihood result in buses not being available for the currently scheduled launch of the East Leg, which is the fall of 2027. With that, I would be pleased to answer any questions.
Okay, so first we need a mover and a seconder on the three-part recommendation. So that's to approve the purchase of the 2026 replacement bus requirements at a total cost of $16,731,075 exclusive of applicable taxes. Approve the purchase of the 2026 expansion bus requirements at a total cost of $11,122,308 exclusive of applicable taxes, and to direct administration to issue the requisite purchase order for the 29 buses. Moved by Commissioner Collier, seconded Commissioner Little. Thank you very much. Okay, any discussion? Commissioner Collier.
Couple of questions. With respect to the bus pricing, the report notes that it's firm, subject to applicable taxes. Does just knowing that bus chassis are traveling across the border from Winnipeg to Minnesota, does that tax include tariff, or is that actually built into the price?
Our understanding of taxes would not refer to tariffs.
Okay. So that's good. Question 2 then is, there's mention report with respect to exchange and exchange rate, and that should the exchange rate become favorable, we, at the time of line entry, we'll actually get a recalculated price. What about if it's in the inverse?
We're good. So they've confirmed this pricing is good as long as we issue purchase orders within 60 days. If the exchange rate improves, we will see the benefit, but if it goes the other way, this pricing is firm.
Okay.
All right.
Good job.
Good negotiating.
And then with respect to rapid transit, does the city, if they're purchasing in their own name, I guess a couple of questions. One's technical. I assume that we're the fleet operator. If they're purchasing, it's just they're writing the check. They aren't the owner of the chassis. It just comes to us, or do we know that yet?
Well, I mean, if you look at the shelter infrastructure, the intent is the city has paid for that up front, and then there will be a transfer of the asset to LTC once the project is complete.
Okay.
I would assume buses would work the same way. Either we could order them and the city could we would just invoice the city once the.
Because like the first year capital in terms of the first buses were actually included in the business case.
Yes,
right?
yes. So either way, I mean, we could pay and the city could reimburse, or they could just, they can't technically order the buses. They don't have a contract with New Flyer.
That's
So if the city wants to order the buses, they will have to go through an RFP process. It will be a completely separate contract than this contract.
So then I guess my question for that would be, the outcome of that would be subject to the open market. Let's say Nova wins because.
New Flyer is the only bus manufacturer in Canada that will supply diesel buses. So it would, but having said that, in order to comply with the provincial and federal spending guidelines, notwithstanding there's only one supplier, you still have to go through an open market RFP process. So they still have to go through that process, which will eventually lead to a contract with New Flyer if they're buying diesel buses, which will obviously extend that time frame.
Okay, because what I was just sort of thinking about is Craig and Shops and hey, we've got an entirely New Flyer fleet and we've got X9s and X10s. What happened if we went with Grand XYZ? So okay, those are my questions.
Councilor Ferrer.
Following up on that, so we do have New Flyer buses in the fleet right now. 100%. So there's a possibility of like a single source procurement that we could probably capture that into.
We essentially, when we went out last year to tender, or in 2024, New Flyer was the only bidder. Because Nova was essentially making the decision at that time to get out of the diesel market. So, I mean, it wasn't a sole source because we did go out. Now, having said that, we are aware that there are some European bus manufacturers that are looking to get into the North American market. That's very premature because there's a series of testing and things that they would have to go through before those buses would meet the specifications for most transit agencies. So those things could change. I'm just saying for 2027 buses, the only manufacturer you're buying a diesel bus from in Canada is New Flyer.
If it went through the city and it didn't have your, the contracts or the policy or the procurement policy that we're working on, whatever the prices could change as well.
Absolutely.
All right, second question. So the tariffs are not impacting New Flyer buses, or, well, I just to confirm that?
So my understanding, and I'm a member of this bus manufacturing task force, of which so are New Flyer and Nova Bus. So my understanding is the pricing that we got here has contemplated the potential impacts of tariffs. Again, the nature and extent of which could get much worse. They've contemplated the impacts of the tariffs that the US is threatening. Their bigger concern is the retaliatory tariffs that the Canadian government can put in place, which will essentially just impact the price of the bus. Because the buses that are built in North America go back and forth across the border. So it will just be a double whammy. One of the things the CUDA task force is looking at is putting together a recommendation for Canadian government to exclude the bus manufacturing sector from any retaliatory tariffs, because essentially all it's going to do is drive up the cost of buses, and we all still have to buy buses. So it's essentially just going to cost more to buy something that's currently being funded by the federal and provincial governments. So that will be one of the recommendations that's coming forward. Having said that, that doesn't mean that that will actually happen. And that could, again, impact, but we have a solid contract in place with New Flyer that essentially says for the next 3 years, when we order buses, here's the escalation clauses that you can apply in order to come up with a price. So we've got a solid contract. Now, if New Flyer goes bankrupt because they can't meet the terms and conditions of all of these contracts that they've got out of there as the result of tariffs going back and forth, then that will be a different conversation with the commission at some point.
If there's tariffs on the side of the border, 25%, that just one trip back and one trip the other way, you're talking 100%.
Well, except it's on component parts, right? It's not on the entire bus, and that's where it gets. I mean, we've asked manufacturers to try to come up with estimates, and I mean, they're ranging from, it could be an 8% increase to a 40%. Like, nobody really knows yet, because it would get very specific on that type of thing. So it's still very up in the air. But having said that, I mean, the reason we're recommending this is we need to get the orders placed and get in the queue. Otherwise, we don't have a hope of seeing any buses in 2026. And that's going to put us, in an even worse spot than we are right now, while we're waiting still for the 2024 replacement buses.
That have been pushed out 4 times.
Yeah.
So my last question leads to my next one for Craig. So we have to extend our current bus fleet that we have right now that's already kind of aged out. How do you foresee that?
So through the chair, I constantly meet with Kelly over that, because we have buses that should already be retired that we're keeping on the road. I'll weigh the cost of the bus to keep it on the road for a few more months to knowing my next deadline when the buses are coming. Some of the buses will look at them and say that we can't put them on the road. So we'll go back and talk to Katie and say, how are we going to address this going forward? I've told you since September that we're not going to make service at any given month, which we've made every month through. We thought March 1st was going to be another additional problem, but we did make it again. So we just continue to keep going on by our stuff that we have been contracting out, noting that supplier also, or that vendor, has been an issue for us, is maintaining the fleet for us, because they don't have people to maintain it. So it's tough for us, but yes, the longer we keep our current buses on the road that should be retired, they can have a catastrophic failure at any time, and then I'll make the decision to pull that bus off the road, update Kelly and Katie as to see where we're going to stand with service. So it is definitely, like Kelly's saying, we need to order these buses to be ahead of that queue. And again, we don't know supply chain issues come 8 months from now, and we could be pushed back again. But us being ahead of the curve now, we stand a better chance of getting in 26.
still 18 month lead time.
Yes.
Any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor of the recommendation? Okay, staff report number 2. This is the secondary school transit pilot program.
At the January meeting, the commission directed staff to report back on a number of outstanding concerns with respect to the secondary school pilot program. The results of which are set out in this report. Highlights include. One, that the commission will be made whole with respect to the revenue associated with participation in the program, as well as any costs associated with the implementation of the pilot. 2, the memorandum of understanding includes an opt-out clause, which can be executed by any of the parties to the agreement. So that's London Transit, the Thames Valley Board, or the City of London. And 3, a copy of this report will be included as an appendix to the report tabled with municipal council to ensure that members of council are aware of the commission's outstanding concerns with respect to the pilot program as currently designed. Given these considerations, administration is recommending the commission confirm participation in the pilot program should the memorandum of understanding and program parameters as set out in this report be ultimately approved by municipal council. Thought I'd please answer any questions.
Okay, so first we need a mover and a seconder on the recommendation. The recommendation is that the commission confirm participation in the secondary school student transit pass pilot program scheduled to launch in September 2025. Moved by Commissioner Gunn, seconded by Commissioner. Okay, I'm assuming there's going to be some discussion on this. So who wants to get us started here? Daryl, I'm looking at you. I'm exhausted. I know, but I just feel like you have some really good wisdom to share on this. So I feel like I should pass it to you first.
It's okay, I'll pull that. Okay, thank you though.
Commissioner Lowe.
So I'm also not going to challenge, mine is more of a comment. So we've been back and forth on us a lot over the last few months. And I just wanted to say I'm appreciative of all the additional detail that's maybe not what I was looking for, but it is what it is. And I mean, we've closed the loop on that. So at this point, my view is, all right, let's just move forward at this time. So thank you for closing the loop on it.
Councilor Ferrer.
So I like how we got an opt-out clause. What are the requirements for that?
It's just a standard, any party can opt out.
For, like, I don't feel it today.
Obviously, you know,
Rain today, it's about.
yes, I mean,
we will not be
the
moving
opt-out
forward with
is standard like that, but obviously there would be attention drawn to that if a party were to opt out, and you would want to have good rationale for that.
We still have issues, like I like how the city, you have this component of civic administration that they're gonna cover all the costs.
Yes, well, that's what's going forward to council. So that's what I'm saying. The commission is confirming this as long as everything in here remains the same. So as long as the commission remains whole, if council were to put something on the floor and say, no, we think the commission should cover the lost revenue, then that's not what the commission agreed to. So that's what I'm trying to say in the recommendation is based on everything that's in here. And my understanding with the parties is that is what's going forward to SPPC if the commission agrees tonight. If council approves that based on all of that, then the commission confirms participation.
Like with my council hat on. And I guess both of them have the same, fears. That would be kind of the impacts of ridership right now on those routes. And I just wanted to know, like, this cost is just for the student or the cards, just for all of the administration, the cards themselves, the actual operation of using those cards. But we still have the impacts on current ridership on those buses. So there's no cost being supplemented for that for any type of tripper buses or anything like that.
No, because quite honestly, we can't implement that. You just heard, like, we're short buses. We don't have tripper buses that we could put out. We can't put tripper buses out now for the issues that we're facing. And we did have discussions with the group about this. Another one could be if we encounter behavioral issues, it's not like we can hire another inspector to just put on those routes. We're going to have to deal with it. But those are the types of things that if they're significant enough that the commission could go, you know what, this isn't working, we're opting out. So that was kind of the consensus of the group, was rather than, because there is no way within a 2-year pilot. We couldn't even buy a bus within 2 years. You just heard that. So it's not like we can buy a bus and say, hey, we're gonna add service to whatever route is being negatively impacted within that pilot period. So there really is no financial way of the city helping us. It's more of a, either we can respond internally, or we can say, you know what, this is not working and we need to opt out.
Comments or questions? Commissioner, what does opting out look like?
Essentially just giving notice to the parties that we're out and the agreement is no longer in place. So the program would cease, the pilot program would cease.
Is there a time for like a 15-day, 30-day at the end of the term?
I don't have the draft agreement
Oh, okay.
in front of me. I'm sure there is some kind of a multi-day notice.
And it was $900,000?
That's the estimate that was provided in the last report. I know Civic Administration is going through that costing right now, because at the time that report was tabled, we didn't have the estimates from Scheit & Bachman, so that number could change slightly when it goes forward to council. That's the number that was included in the previous report.
Okay, and one more question through the chair. Will you be creating a threshold for issues that could happen on the bus or the overcrowding? Like, what are you looking at to say, okay, you know what, we've had 10 instances of violence or aggression, that's it, we're out? Or do you have a time frame or any kind of measurement in place for that?
We've not really thought of thresholds. Our thinking is, obviously, Katie's team will be monitoring the routes that are impacted closely for crowding and that type of thing, and obviously behavioral as well. And we would be coming to the commission immediately if we see this becoming a significant problem. So it's not something that we would say, let's give it 6 months. I mean, if this is a big problem in September, you're going to be hearing from us probably at the October meeting saying, hey, this isn't working.
Sorry, follow-up question, through the chair. Oh my gosh, we ran in my head. That's okay. I'll come back to it. I'll think about it. Commissioner Blair.
Come to, through the chair, sorry, have we come to any proposed metrics, scorecard as to what it is we're going to be measuring in this pilot with the parties?
As I set out in the report, the only thing that's being measured is ridership.
Okay.
And unfortunately, we're measuring it against a baseline that is very unreliable, because it's going to be based on a survey of how much do you currently use transit and how accurate people respond to that survey. So, I mean, I think that's been the underlying problem the commission has had with this pilot from the get-go. We've talked through it at committee. We talked about, is there ways of, measuring how this compares to attendance, graduation rates? Those were all things that were thrown around when this pilot program first came forward. And what we're hearing is there is no desire to even try to correlate and measure those things.
Right, so really what we've got is identifying a student who is a member of a yellow bus population living outside the 2 kilometers that would be bused into Clark Road that potentially is now using our service, and we'd see those rides, and we'd be comparing against a population of the walking students who may now who don't qualify for yellow bus transportation, who may now actually opt in and use their new bus pass. That's the only 2 things we're measuring. Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Any comments? Actually, Commissioner.
Sorry, at the same time. Sorry, through the chair. If there were behavioral issues and we are talking about minors and you have to look at the recordings, what kind of liability do we have with that?
I wouldn't say any. I mean, we've got posted on every bus that we record, and it's our right to be able to look at those recordings should anybody be misbehaving. So I mean, we've dealt with minors before that are misbehaving based on our video recordings. I don't anticipate that would be an issue.
Okay, sorry, go ahead, Councilor. Oh, my apologies.
Chair. So, the thing that like I was saying before, that I'm most concerned is with the, like, the crowding, tax riders who are bus pass payers or cash payers or whatever, and they regularly use those routes, and they would be able to get on. I didn't necessarily see as much detail of like the potential impacts in that regard on the report. I was wondering, like I would be kind of the opinion to, like, I would like to get that information if possible. So anyway, that is a possibility.
It's going to be very difficult. I mean, if we get contacts, so if David calls in and says, hey, I took this route to work every day, and ever since you put this program in, I can't get on the bus, so I can't take the bus anymore. Certainly that's anecdotal that we have, but in terms of, it's very difficult. Like I can say we're currently selling X number of city passes a month, and ooh, that dropped by 20 once we put this in place. Is that 20 people who can no longer use it? Because like drawing that direct correlation is very difficult, because we don't know when people are buying a pass, what they're using it for, when they're using it for. So we would, I mean, obviously, again, the load counts we can look at. And then you could try to match that with contacts that we would receive if people are saying, hey, this is a problem. But in terms of just mining data and coming up with a hard number, that's next to impossible.
Without actually real scenario of trying it out, like actually.
Exactly.
See, I'm worried about doing that, because all it takes is like one person trying to get to work, like they're late and then they get fired. And that's kind of like on my contract, which I'm not really a fan of. But there's no way to kind of send this back and get that information.
No.
Mr. Madden?
I'm just curious, what I don't understand is there data, do you collect data to know how full these buses are currently? Like, do you know how full they are at a certain time of day? And yeah,
We know every person that gets on and every person that gets off of every bus. We have that data.
yeah, okay. And so for these routes during school time, I imagine it's the ride to school that's the problem, as opposed to the ride home. So the ride home is at like 2:30.
Depending, I mean, you're going to have students that participate in extracurricular activities, and if you've got a whole team of students that happen to try to get on the bus that you're trying to get on, going home at 5 o'clock, for example, that could be an issue, right? So those are all the things that we can speculate, but until it's actually in place, we really don't know what those impacts are going to be. We can, again, compare load counts pre and post.
Right.
But our pre will really have to be a previous September. It's not like we can look at August ride counts and compare to September, because it's two very different scenarios. So even that is, there's some interpretation in those comparators, but those are the kind of things we will be looking at and attempting to stay on top of and keeping the commission apprised.
Okay, other comments or questions? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Recommendation.
With reluctance.
So 1, 2, 3 in favor. That's a no from Cheryl. That's a no from you. I gotta go with the no's, I'm sorry. That's a tie, that means it's yes.
Advise accordingly.
Miss Callaway, I love your haircut, by the way. I was admiring you earlier. I love your bags. Over to you for the 2024 Mutual Respect Human Rights Summary Report.
Thanks. Through the chair, staff report 3 provides the commission with an overview of the past 4 years of complaints filed alleging violations of policies relating to our human rights and diversity policy and our mutual respect in the workplace policy. As the report indicates, the number of human rights complaints filed at the LTC level has remained fairly static over the last 3 years. There has been a notable increase in complaints filed by our operators regarding treatment stemming from the customer base. With and as discussed prior, with the most recent education campaign rolled out in November to our customers on expected behavior, we hope to see a reduction in this area, and we will continue to take action as warranted. Further, the report indicates at the end of last year, 27% of our employees had completed the new training on human rights, diversity, and mutual respect. And as at the end of this week, we've reached approximately 38% of the employee group. Training will continue ongoing for the remainder of 2025 and also going into 2026. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions or provide any additional information.
Okay, first we need a mover and a seconder to file. Commissioner Player, thank you. Second by Commissioner. Okay, any discussion? Commissioner Matt.
Through the chair, my question is, human rights complaints, do they include the human right, like paratransit? Complaints that come through paratransit, and the reason I ask is then what happens, I know that paratransit is a contract, and so does the complaint just get sent back to Voyagle for them to deal with, or do you deal with it?
So through the chair, if the complaint is in regards to a driver specialized, it would go back to, and it is not reflected in these numbers. If the complaint is regarding one of our employees, say in the brokerage area, then it would be investigated and it would be included within here.
One follow-up, so you don't have any follow-up with complaints that go back to Voyagle?
No,
That's just Voyagle.
Yes, through the chair, that would be dealt with through Voyagle. If it's relating to the drivers.
Right.
Thank you. For comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor to note and file. Back to you, Ms. Galloway, for the 2024 attendance and disability management group.
Through the chair, the staff report 4 provides the commission with an overview of lost time over the past 4 years. The report details specific categories of lost time and the reasons for lost time increasing or decreasing in each of the 4 categories. The management team at LTC is taking all reasonable action to reduce where possible lost time within the organization. The management team is well versed in supporting employees through challenging situations and ensuring that they get the support they need. Additional focus and emphasis in this area really started occurring in early 2020 with the start of the pandemic. Further, as mentioned in the report, there is a new legislative leave that is coming into place July 1, 2025. That leave through the Ontario government will allow individuals to take up to 26 weeks of sick leave. And in order to obtain that leave, they just need a simple note from a doctor or nurse or other practitioner. And people can break up that leave throughout the year. So they could take 1 month, come back to work, take 1 month. It is a protected leave, so they will still be entitled to their vacation, their pension, and all of the benefits. So we anticipate that that will impact lost time at London Transit, as with all employers in Ontario. So we have little control over that type of leave. They are entitled to it, but there will be challenges because it's just a simple 1 note, 1-liner, I'm off work. So that will impact our collective agreement.
Okay, so I need a mover and a seconder to note and file. Moved by Commissioner Player, seconded by Commissioner Little. Thank you. Okay, any discussion?
Actually, sorry, just a question with respect to STD, short-term disability. That's just like what we categorize as a routine sick day, right?
No, it's not. Through the chair, no, our short-term disability is where a claim has been adjudicated through our insurance company and it is beyond a 3-day period and they are paid through our insurance carrier. So it's not just a single.
So it's, okay, so it's 3 days, you're off on sick leave or sick day, and then this kicks in.
Yeah, it does kick in, yes, through the chair. The singles, there is, if you go to category, to explain that further, where it gets a little bit confusing, is on the bottom of page 4, you'll see other lost time. That's where no STD or no LTD or no WSIB. So that through the chair would be considered your I've lost 1 to 2 days sick leave.
Okay, so then if I were to look at these numbers, so average per employee in operations, for example, 7.2 days per month in other lost time. And then I stack on top of that an average, what was the number, 11.6 in short term. So we're to 18 days, so like a day and a half-ish a month.
When you look at the employee group, if you look at through the chair, if you look at short-term disability, WSIB work-related lost time, long-term disability, and that other lost time, we're averaging 17.8 days per year per employee.
Okay, so a day and a half, okay.
Yeah.
Is that typical?
Through the chair, it's very complicated because it really depends how each organization tracks their lost time. So, you'll see it slightly, the 17.8 is less than the 19 days in 2021, but in 2021, we were dealing with the pandemic.
Right.
So you can't really compare. So I love when we go through this, we really have gone back to sort of 2019 to see pre-pandemic, and it is on target, but it's high, but it is standard. It's not going down. Sorry.
I guess really, is this sort of typical for transit operation? Like, I'm now thinking about this from my telecom hat. And I mean, you know, when I was at Bell, if you had more than 2 absences in a calendar year, you were basically showing a whole bunch of stuff, right? So.
Through the chair, we do have an attendance management program, which is covered. And that standard has been in place since 2011. And it's basically if you've had 10 days and greater than 3 occurrences, you will be in the program. It's a non-punitive program.
Perfect.
It's to develop, you know, a relationship to find out what's going on and to try to support the employee. That's the extent of that program.
Okay. I'm just learning the norms of what would be considered normal for transit operation versus.
Through the chair, CUDA they used to do an analysis of lost time through all of the properties. The problem was each property completely reported their absences differently. We are giving you everything. So we're not hiding anything. Other properties will say, well, this is paid time, so we're not including it, or this is, another category. What you see is everything. The one category that is not included in the 17.8 days is the protected leaves. So I go back to that 27 weeks actually, and maternity leaves or short-term medical leaves. That's not included because we have no impact. They are legislated and people are entitled to.
Thank you.
Okay, other comments or questions? Commissioner.
To the chair, this leave of absence, is there a list of what serious medical conditions can qualify, or is it just anything that a doctor determines?
Through the chair, anything the doctor determines, and it's a 1-sentence letter. I am off work sick. Whereas through the chair currently right now, we ask for medical, we ask when you sought the medical, what are your functional capabilities? Because we're always looking for a return to work, whether it's job related or non-job related. We try to bring people back. That's why we have a really robust return to work program. It's challenging for my co-departments to deal with that. But this is going to remove that ability. So we are right now, none of it's really been defined. So we are in the same boat as all of the employers. In a year or 2 years after cases have been challenged, there will be a better definition that we can apply. But right now, it's going to have a significant impact.
Oh, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Because this really avoids employees having to use STD or.
It is an unpaid.
Right, but it's still.
People don't seem to care that it's unpaid.
Could they get EI?
They could get EI or they could not get EI.
So you don't even have to worry about your benefits if you can get EI for a month with a 1-sentence note from a doctor.
Through the chair, and they'll still have access to all of our benefits, their vacation, their pension.
And their job.
And their job. So it will be difficult for these departments to make that. But we will work with them.
So to follow up, what was maybe you don't know, but what was the reasoning behind this new legislation? Or perhaps Commissioner Collier could explain.
I'm
I
on furlough.
can explain it.
Yeah, I mean, it's to protect those employees that don't have the same access to the programs that employers such as ours have. It's for the smaller companies, private companies that really don't offer anything. And then the minute somebody gets sick, they lose their job. So we already have all of that. I mean, we'll work with it.
It's also a privacy thing. It's the same with
Yeah.
Students at the post-secondary level. If they say, I need accommodation, they don't have to tell you like, is it a mental health issue, whatever it is. So it's kind of like, if you go there, cause like short-term disability, long-term disability will make your doctor fill out a form that basically sets out your impairments, cause you're going through a benefits carrier like Manulife or something like that, but this way you don't have to disclose what it is. So if it's, hey, I'm having like a psychiatric episode, you don't have to tell your employer that, right? Because no one's gonna make you fill out a thing. So that's why this legislation exists, is to protect people's privacy in theory, to make sure that they're not disclosing something like that they want to disclose.
So it doesn't
Students do it too.
protect the business though.
No, no, just like it doesn't protect the college or the professor, right? It's just the kid who's saying, I can't do this exam today, I have a medical issue. And you cannot probe it further than that, you have to accept it and reschedule, it's the same. Yeah, no, so no, it does not protect the business in the slightest.
And I must say, I am looking at this through the lens of someone who is very fortunate to have all those benefits, right? So, and as a manager, I'm thinking,
Yeah.
wow, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be very challenging, but wow, that's.
Through the chair, one of the other legislative changes that's coming through that's not going to affect us because we already have a process in place that requires medical, but if anyone is, if you miss 1 to 3 days, and I think this has started July 1, 2025, no employer can ask for a medical documentation anymore. So, but we have medical after the 4th day, so we don't do the 1, 2, 3 days, but that will significantly impact the smaller employers that don't have those processes. That's all.
Other comments or questions for Commissioner?
Just one question, I know it's probably a dumb one, but I just need to realize, nothing has changed in the way these metrics and everything is the same from all these years up to the tables go back to 2021.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Like the way you kind of get the metrics, the way you're kind of getting these numbers, nothing has changed in that process.
Through the chair, absolutely nothing since we've been doing this report. We have the exact same metrics.
Or same methods.
Mechanism, sorry, the exact same mechanism, yes. So we are truly comparing an apple to an apple. Or an orange. Is that the same?
To an orange.
Is it? Sorry.
Other comments or questions? All right, seeing none, I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor of noting and filing? Right, so carried, awesome. Okay, we are on staff report number 5. This is back to Ms. Fleschney for the 2024 conventional transit service performance report.
Thank you. I can provide a general overview, and then if the commission has specific questions that we can direct to the various directors, we can go from there. So this report sets out the customer service report for the conventional transit service for 2024, combining results from the voice of the customer survey and customer contacts received. With respect to the conventional service, it's important to consider that service hours in 2024 increased by approximately 4% over 2023. And as such, significant improvements in customer satisfaction ratings were not anticipated. In addition to summarizing the customer views on each aspect of the service, the report identifies the areas of focus for 2025 based on these results. In terms of service performance, the areas of focus include early and late schedule, as well as transfer connections, all of which support the highest ranked service priority from the voice of the customer survey, which was on-time performance. In terms of operator performance, areas of focus include those relating to the safe operation of the vehicle, as well as the attitude of the bus operator. And with respect to safety, preventable accidents continue to be an area of focus. As the report indicates, a driver refresher program was implemented in early 2024 for all new drivers that is undertaken at the 9-month mark. And it's intended to readdress some of the critical areas where we're seeing preventable accidents. So things like clearance issues, defensive driving, those type of things. So it's an opportunity for the trainers to revisit those drivers after they've been on the road for 9 months. And that program was developed with feedback from recent hires who had been through the training program. So what do you feel was lacking? What would you like to be revisited? That type of thing. So that program is underway, and we're hoping that will result going forward in a decline in preventable accidents. And then finally, the satisfaction results with respect to customer service representatives also declined in 2024. That is discussed in the report. A significant number of customer contacts in 2024 were related to on-time performance and issues stemming from the nature and extent of construction projects that were going on. And unfortunately, in the majority of those cases, when someone's livid and calling customer service, the customer service representatives don't have an answer that's going to make the customer happy. They can essentially say, we're sorry, we're running late, we're doing the best we can, but the perception of that is that customer service wasn't necessarily helpful. Unfortunately, there isn't anything that you do to be helpful other than, try to express understanding and give customers options. So notwithstanding that, it has been identified as an area of focus for 2025. So with that, we can take any questions.
Okay, so first I need a mover and a seconder to note and file. Moved by Commissioner Collier, seconded. Thank you, Commissioner Root. Okay, any comments or questions? Okay,
Oh, sorry, I was waiting for, I don't want to be the first person. I was the first person. Fair categories. When I look at cash and it's less than 5%, and I look at ticket and stored value, do we have a breakout of what is card versus what is actual paper tickets?
Yeah.
Is it like 80-20? Is it,
It's probably less than that, maybe 64, like 75%.
Is card and then
No,
is
the other way.
it's the other way? Okay.
Yeah, in terms of the store
Yeah.
value tickets, yeah.
So I guess from a question, cash obviously we're not going to get away from handling cash, but I can think back in previous work lives and Canadian coin processors down the Exeter Road and the cost of cash handling and what that is taking. How much is that in terms of coin processing? Do we actually do that processing here, or is that?
We have a contractor.
We have a contractor.
that comes and picks it up and does.
And how much do they take for that?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. It's like a flat fee.
Yeah, yeah.
Processing.
Oh, it's a flat fee?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
No, it's X percent.
No.
Okay. Because I'm just sort of thinking as we are continuing to get to a cashless society, looking to SB and, what upgrade that we actually be putting to, the fare terminals on the bus. At what point in time do we actually look at our fare media and balance out the cost of offering cash, which I don't think we'll be able to get away from, or, paper tickets to, we're migrating to stored value cards, right? Because we are actually going to put that investment in, and it, while we are operating with these legacy systems, it actually comes at a cost to us as an operator, and as lean as we are, we need to be looking at stuff like that, right?
Through the chair, so you'll recall in the work program report that was tabled last month, we're looking at replacing the onboard validators for the smart card system, and we, included the requirement that they have to be open to be able to do open payment if the commission decides to go that way at some point in the future. The other issue that you will be getting a report back at some point this year as part of that whole fair media program is looking at phasing out paper tickets. Part of the rationale is the processing and the costs associated. The other part of the rationale is the current fare boxes that we have on our buses are no longer being manufactured. So at some point, and it's been on the work plan to basically move to cash box that doesn't have to process tickets, and that would be done in tandem with getting rid of the paper tickets. So it's been something that's been on the horizon. It just has continued to get the can has been kicked down the road because of other pressing issues. But that is something that you will be getting reports back on. We have, the biggest issue with the paper tickets, although we've not seen a huge transfer to smart card, we haven't pushed it. The biggest issue is the social service agencies that hand out tickets.
Yeah.
And we've always said we won't get rid of paper tickets until we come up with a solution that you'll be able to use. And we have seen some solutions in place. Grand River, who uses our smart card system, there are disposable cards, tappable cards that you could load 2 rides on. unfortunately, they're not cheap because there's a chip in there, right? So you have to weigh that, you know, with the cost, but there are things out there that we could implement for those specific situations, and then everyone else would be, no, you need to go to Smart Card. So those, you will be getting reports back on that throughout this year, with plans to transition away.
Comments or questions? Commissioner Weld.
Just on page 7, so the call stats that are there, we're down in calls answered, 8% year over year. Calls offered are not there. Are they also down? Like, what is our overall abandonment rate at this point?
We're on, so the table at the top. of
The
page
table
7.
at the top, yeah, so my point is, the first line there, the first row is showing the answered calls
Versus the offered.
versus
Yeah.
the offered, yeah.
Do we look at offered at all, Carol? So the total calls coming in versus those answered?
Well, we show, through the share, the answer is. Yeah,
We don't have that comparison. We could bring that back.
If we could get it, that would be great, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because I'm curious if that's also a decline or if we're actually increasing our abandonment rates, which is not great.
Right.
But given all the construction and likely complaints from that, I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay.
Any comments or questions? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please identify. Okay, on to staff report number 6. So this is the 2024 Specialized Transit Service.
So this report sets out the same statistics for the specialized service. Unlike the conventional service, the specialized service hours in 2024 increased by 27% over 2023. And as such, we did anticipate seeing improved results, which we did in the voice of the customer, which we talked about at last month's meeting, and it's reflected again in this report. In terms of service performance, the areas of focus that have been identified as priorities from the customer group are booking ease, travel time, and trip availability. The great news with respect to that is all of those things should be addressed through the implementation of the new system, as well as the continued implementation of those incremental service hours. So those are all things that, you know, have been in the work plan that we are working towards. In terms of service performance, in terms of driver performance, while unsafe driving and attitude are identified as areas of focus based on the customer contacts, which if you look at the numbers, they are very minimal. The voice of the customer survey results indicate near perfect performance with scores of 97% agreement that vehicles are operated safely and drivers are helpful. So it's again, just a caution when you look at customer contacts and the fact that we got, 35 complaints about a driver, a vehicle being operated not safely in the grand scheme of things. Yes, it went up compared to previous years, but if you look at voice of the customer, that's a better reflection of what the perceptions are. So
The plural of anecdote is not always data.
exactly. So with that, we'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Okay, need a mover and a seconder. No, thank you, Commissioner Root. Okay, any comments or questions? Commissioner Fletcher.
So looking at the performance complaints, what does accessibility mean? Like in terms of, is this the bus was positioned in the wrong spot? Wasn't letting them do a curb cut or?
It's kind of a catch-all, and essentially, as it was in 2023, when we analyzed those complaints, in the majority of those 13 complaints, it was about a pickup or drop off location.
Okay.
And the fact that a customer wasn't necessarily happy with it, but those were results of detours or construction zones or those type of things. So it's more about, if a customer says, I don't believe the service is, accessible to my standards, that's kind of what gets caught in that category.
So then the other thing is, because we've added all these service hours, yay, but then we've got, no shows which have gone up. Is that just sort of spot things driven by the construction in this city?
No shows, for as long as we've had control over the data of the specialized service, which started in 1998, no shows have been a very steady percentage of trips. It's just, it's an inherent part of a pre-booked service.
Okay.
We're certainly hoping that the new system with the reminders and the trip notifications will help with that, because in many cases, it's someone's booked a trip and they've just forgotten about it, right? So the trip notifications, we're hoping will help with that. But I can say we've tried all kinds of things over those, 20-some years, and that no-show rate has not fluctuated by even a half percentage point, over that period. It's just an inherent part of.
Okay,
of
just
that
so,
service.
just so I'm clear here, so this is no show, like,
Oh, the number of complaints?
Right,
Oh, so that's people calling
Okay.
saying, you gave me a no-show and I don't think I should have had a no-show.
Okay,
That's what
okay.
that is. I'm sorry,
Gotcha,
yes.
okay, I thought this was people complaining, said, where's my bus? Okay.
No, this is people, this is people complaining that they've probably been sent a letter saying you had a no-show and they don't
Okay.
necessarily agree or they're not happy about it.
Those are my questions.
Any comments or questions, Commissioner Martin?
I just have a couple of questions. For the customer service or the voice of the customer, how many surveys were actually done? Oh, by phone?
It was in the last report. I want to say it was was it 700 and something?
61 or.
Yeah, I'd have to, I mean, it
something
was,
like that.
if you look at the last agenda, the number was right in there. I just don't remember it off the top of my head.
And do you have any way of knowing when you make those calls, if they're riders or if they're, people who help customers get rides, like parents and agencies and.
We don't make the calls, the contractor does.
We provided them through Chair, I apologize, we provided them with list of people who are regular riders, so. Can't remember the exact parameters that we used, but we didn't call people that haven't been riding in a year. We would have been calling the customer number on file. Now, that could be the Jackie the mom.
Yeah.
So quite possibly, but it wouldn't have been calling an agency like Larsh. We would have been calling the customer
Customers.
first.
Okay.
I hope that's.
Yeah, no, that's fine. The other question I have is just when you, on the first page under specialized transit survey efficiency. And where you're talking about the service hours and the service hours not being delivered. There's no comment there at all on the reason for the service hours not being delivered, which I think were largely voyage, right? Contract and manpower, right? And I just wondered why that isn't part of that report.
Through the chair, it speaks to some of why it didn't go in. So that the service hour improvements were budgeted for the entire year.
Right.
If you recall, we ended up doing some of them in April because they didn't have the resource availability for vehicles. And then some of them got put in September and a little bit after. So that created the deficit month over month because we didn't put them in January. Then additionally, as been reported through several meetings, was they didn't meet what they said they could meet as well. So both of those things contributed to that, but as it states here, it's talking about the budget piece simply because we reported previously on the fact that the vendor struggled.
Yeah.
Up to including last month, there was a detailed report with respect to they missed too much.
Okay, so that's captured in another report. So that's.
And just through the chair, those comments will be captured in our annual report where we're talking about everything together. These reports generally focus more on the customer contact side of things. So we don't get, we provide that analysis just as part of it, but in the annual report, there will be specific commentary as to why we did or we didn't meet budget with respect to all of these different metrics.
One last question. It's under the chart, under voice of the consumer, there's commentary there on the complaints that were received about trips that are too long, right? Trip duration. And what's picked up in here is the comparison that during the pandemic, people had single ride things and thus are complaining that the trips are longer. And I don't agree that, or I agree that that's one section of people that are complaining about longer rides. But I think there's other reasons people complain about longer rides. And I think a lot of the time it's that they've been waiting forever for a bus. And then when the bus comes, they end up being on that bus for a long period of time. So that's not captured in the commentary anywhere. It's more, to me, it's like the customers have unreasonable expectations about the length of their ride, where they actually have some legitimate reasons to be complaining about length of rides.
So just Commissioner Mon, just before we go further. We have a question to put to senior leadership.
Sure, I can ask a question. So that's captured there. So the question would be, that's obviously come from the surveys. So what percentage of people who are complaining about travel time are saying that I'm complaining about the travel time because I was used to getting a ride and now it's way longer because it's no longer the pandemic?
So I can, through the chair, I can sort of answer that. I wouldn't have the data on that exactly. I can tell you that currently right now, 98% of our trips are being picked up within the half hour time. I could tell you that less than 3% of our trips are being where somebody's on board for over an hour. Anecdotally, I could tell you that people got direct rides through the pandemic.
Yeah.
They didn't prior, they were on a shared ride service. Anecdotally, as it's stating sort of in the report, we created an expectation through that period that our policy doesn't hold us to, and that we can't meet if we want to meet a lot of trips. You're going to hear me talk in the next report. We did 1,230 trips today. That's 300 more than we were doing in October per day.
Mhm.
For that to be achievable, we have a shared ride service.
Right.
When you have shared ride service, people are going to be on the bus a little bit longer. Through the pandemic, when we were doing 300 and 400 trips a day, people got wonderful service. It was the greatest taxi company you've ever seen in your life. So I think that when you look at that piece about being on the bus longer, I would suggest that that's going to continue to be somewhat of a complaint, no different than the complaints that we get that say, my daughter was picked up 25 minutes ago, she's always home by now. We say, well, they're dropping somebody else off along the way. No, they don't do that, they bring her straight home. That's what's leading to those complaints. And I think it's important to recognize that when you look at the actual data, we're providing trips the way that is acceptable under the policy. The thing is that sometimes people order a 12-ounce steak and they wanted a 16-ounce steak. And I think it's important for us to remember that. So I can't speak to exactly how many of them were there. I can tell you that we investigate all of the complaints specifically for on-time performance. I would suggest that the greater majority of every complaint that we look at when people say they were on the bus for too long, they weren't on the bus for over an hour. They were just on the bus longer than they wanted to be. So
Is there data on that? Like how many people are on the bus for more than an hour?
Absolutely, it's less than 3%.
And does that hit a report ever?
Well,
It will, through the chair. So all of those stats were things we historically reported on monthly to the advisory committee. But the failings of the route match system made it very difficult to pull a lot of that stuff. With this new system, we will be re-implementing those, like we will be reporting regularly on those metrics. So,
Okay, because I think that's a good number to have, right?
and just through the chair, one more thing with respect to travel time. The reason that we've identified it as an area of focus is because it was 20% in terms of importance ranking. If you look at the approval rating from Voice of the Customer, it was still 79%. Like that's very high. Like that's one away from us saying it's not a problem. It's 80% or over. So I think the other piece is the reason I even identified it as a priority is because customers are saying this is important to me. We're just trying to provide a little bit of background about why we believe customers are now saying it's important when in previous Voice of the Customers, it was not important. And that goes to the comments that Mr. Wilson made that because they were getting those direct trips.
Okay, that makes good sense to me. Thank you.
Any comments or questions?
So for the 10,000 hours for 2025, I guess before I ask that, well, what are the actual hours? For 2024 specialized, that number again?
Through the chair, out of the 10,000?
We weren't able to hit the full 10,000.
Well, no, because it wasn't implemented in January. I would have to do some.
You'll
I
get
say
those
I
stats
mean,
part of
Mike
the year-end
would need to-
reports in March.
Yeah.
For 2025, I see in the report that we are gonna reach the 10,000 hour threshold. I just wanted to know if you could kind of provide, the reasoning of your confidence in that. Like, we know that Voyager is gonna be able to give us extra vehicles, we know that they have personnel.
So through the chair, as discussed multiple times over the last year with respect to their struggles to get resource availability, both vehicles and bodies. They've made significant improvements in the month of February from prior, based on some initiatives that they put in place that I can say have cut down their lost time hours by more than 70% from February over January compared to January. So I would suggest that they're going to do a lot better job meeting the demand of the service, based on the, you know, the processes they have in place now. They've also indicated that they have the availability to meet additional service requirements from us. So when we say, hey, listen, we need extra vehicles on Friday night hockey game, they've got process in place now that is making it so that we can meet those demands. I wouldn't suggest that they will always every single day run all of the hours that we expect, because buses break down, buses get into accidents, things happen. So there are going to be some reductions from that. But I'm a lot more confident that they're going to meet the expected level of services that we're promising at this point, and they've demonstrated that.
Yeah, can I just add to that? I think our optimism is more about the way the budget was approved. So if we look at the multi-year budget, when we finally got budget approval for that initial 10,000 hours that went in 2024, we had to give then, once we got approval, we had to give Voyago notice that, hey, you need to buy vehicles. And if you recall, they couldn't get vehicles. We gave them permission to do the ProMasters, which got us. So there were a number of things that were out of anyone's control, and it had to do with budget timing. But because now we've got the multi-year budget hours each year, we were able to tell Voyago 7 months ago, on January 1, you need to be able to add another 10,000 hours, and that's X number of vehicles and X number of bodies. So we were able to give them that advance notice to allow them to procure those vehicles and make sure they were in a position where in the earlier year, just budget timing didn't allow that. So I know I've heard it raised by other members of council. We gave you all this money and you didn't use it. There was no possible way for us to use it in that initial year. No different than when we get approval for conventional service hours. We don't use that full 18,000 in the first year because it gets implemented in September, because it takes time to get buses and put all of those changes in place. So it's not that we're not using it. We're telling you the annualized cost, but in that first year, we can't necessarily use that full, you know, that full allocation.
That's good. So we've got vehicles, we've got the personnel, and there are process improvements to make sure that we can kind of capture, I guess, the hockey games or whatever the example was. I don't know, maybe that was an example. Would you be able to kind of touch on maybe some of the process improvements? You happen to know like what the board would do on your end to accommodate?
I just want to make sure that we're still really focusing just on specialized, right? Because we do have, I think, a further update further along the line. There, so we're still like with the hockey games and stuff.
No, I just said the example that I thought I remember I heard, but my real question is if any of those process improvements for that? And I do have some more questions to go into the next item. I know that that's what the passenger portal or whatever it's called. I don't want to go there yet, but just to that one.
On a through the chair, on a, you know, an arm's reach level, because I don't manage at the vendor, I would suggest that they've done some changes with respect to when their recruitment process is in place and the onboarding, some training stuff, size of classes, having that stuff available. They've also made some changes with respect to their maintenance program and how they address vehicles and when vehicles will get fixed and at what threshold they would take a vehicle out of service. They've also prepared to have additional people and vehicles available when service does break down beyond how they did in the past by bringing some vehicles in from another property to ensure that they had an excess amount. So they've done a handful of things to ensure that they can better meet the demands.
I look forward to that, you know, fully kind of just giving capacity that we have to our ridership. My last question on this one is in the report, is that registering decline for the cleanup of the database. Could you touch on maybe some very, what did you use to say that this registrator is not being used, so therefore we can take them out of the database?
So through the chair, and I believe it would have been the report following the cleanup We called anybody that hadn't ridden in the year previous, so it ended up being a 14-month capture, so anybody that hadn't ridden at that time, we called them. The greatest majority of the removals were people that either were no longer with us or no longer in the area, so they had moved away, and they gave us that concrete information. We didn't remove anybody that we couldn't confirm whether or not they were still using the service. We did place people inactive that hadn't used the service in over a year, but if they call us, they become immediately active again, but they're still captured in our registered base now. So people were removed because they passed away or they were no longer in the area. Essentially, that's what it was. Or they told us they didn't want the service, which there was a handful of those as well.
I don't know if I saw this on the report. How many inactive ones did you kind of tell me to inactive, but they're still on the database? What's the proportion of that?
Through the chair, I don't know the percentage, but I think it was somewhere around 1,200 out of the 8,000, if I had to guess. Now, and I would suggest that we've turned a handful of them since then. Because they elected to ride again. But these are people that hadn't used the service at all in 14 months, and we couldn't get in contact with them. So we made the effort. We called them, they didn't answer. We couldn't remove them from the service because they're still registrants, but there was no sense of keeping them in the active database.
Are you looking at me?
No,
Just
no,
to
not
smile or?
Smile.
You look so.
Support, you know.
I'm catching the good
There
vibes.
you
Thank you.
go.
All right, I'm gonna call a question to Northern File. Excellent. Okay, so now we're gonna go back to Mr. Wilson, specialized service schedule system update.
Through the chair, thank you. Staff report number 7 speaks predominantly for itself, speaks to our experience with respect to the implementation of the new system. I wanted to talk about some stuff that's now this week's type of information. So I touched on it a little bit earlier when I spoke, and I said previous to switching the system over, we didn't see days where we carried more than 1,000 people. I can brag and say Monday we did 1,099, Tuesday we did 1,113. Today we're going to exceed 1,230, like I said, which is something to be super stoked about with respect to the performance of the system. When we talk about the wait time in the queue, and you hear people complain about the call time before, and it's touched on in reports. People are waiting for less than 4 minutes to get through on the phone, and that's on average. Now it's a little longer in the morning, but if you called right now, you get it through immediately. The talk time with the performance improvement of the call takers and the customer with respect to utilizing the new system, the talk time's down under 90 seconds on average again this week. So we're seeing great improvements there. February 1st to February 21st, the system, we're picking people up 98% on time within the half an hour of the booked scheduled time. And we're carrying people on time to their destination at over 97% with less than over an hour on board, which is exceptional when you think about the shared ride service. And as the general manager talked about, we're still dealing with the construction impacts and the changing constant stuff happening, specifically where we take people to and from, which is great. Our queue in the morning is generally clear again by 8:15 on average, and that is the case on average this week. It was 8:12. Our queue is cleared. So these are really nice things to report on. The report also speaks to the testing. I can tell you that the test group that we've elected to do some review with the testing was trained today. And was overwhelmingly positive on the response from that. People with different needs went through the testing, and we had a very positive response on that. Requesting the booking online, managing trips online, viewing trips online takes moments. It's much quicker than the previous app that was available. The request time too, which is something that's really I'm excited about. Somebody puts in a request for a booking, it immediately shows up on the screen for the dispatch and call team crew. Once it's approved, it immediately sends out the notification that the booking was accepted. So it's really slick the way that it works, and I'm excited to see it when it gets in full. What it's going to require is everybody to be set up for the full notification suite. So booking reminder, booking request, or booking confirmation notifications, because the system's going to find them those trips. So it's exciting. I would suggest performing at a level that's way beyond what I expected at this point. I mentioned last month, But I thought if we got to April first and then we were in the situation that we were in at that point, I'd have been happy. I'm ecstatic right now with the fact that we did 200, we're gonna do 1,236 trips today. That's a big deal. That's 250 more than we've seen in a single day of the month of December, November, October, for the previous several years. So access to the community has increased and we should be happy. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so first we're gonna need a mover and a seconder to note on file, moved by Commissioner Collier, seconded by Commissioner Dunn. Thank you very much. Okay, any comments or discussion? Councilor Burr.
I'm happy about that, I can say that, I'm sure. And I'm happy that it's gonna continue every month moving forward. Can you give me your horizon on the full phase in once all the pilots are done?
So through the chair, I will promise nothing. I'll say this, I would expect the testing is gonna take a few weeks. I think it's reasonable for us to exhaust that heavily to make sure that it's working the way that we want it. The system itself still needs to be branded the way to look like a transit or what a transit website. That's gonna take some time. Then there's a significant amount of work that's happening with Carolyn and Raven with respect to preparing the documentation and having it be in the right format for everybody to give the information out. Now, I can tell you that our training sessions aren't taking long for people to understand it, but they're talking to when we communicate to the group, when we start to roll it out, however we do it, whether it would be, this block of people, then this block of people, it's probably going to take a little bit of time. We've identified a person internally in the group that is wonderful. She's going to be the point contact for people that want to get some information, some help with respect to setting up their portal, which I think is fantastic as well. She's great. And that's going to be a piece too. To say how long I think it's going to take for us to get to A to Z for 8,000 plus registrants to have them all in the portal, I don't have that crystal ball. I wish that I did. Counselor, I can't tell you that. I will say that we are excitedly optimistic to have a nice aggressive approach to get it out, but I don't want to do it in spite of, making it work. So following the 3-ish weeks of testing, we'll probably start looking at doing with new registrants and then working through the current registrant base. And hopefully before too long, most people will have the opportunity.
It's fair enough. So I guess the next step would be, you said that you kind of have to pick up the user interface to make it look transit. And then you would also bring in new groups and just start phasing out the groups. Then I'm sorry, before that, you have to do kind of like that video and show this is what we got, and this is how to use it.
So through the chair again, the website came and it looks like it belongs to a different company, obviously, because it wasn't built for us. It's a proprietary one for Novus DR. However, it can be branded to have it'll look like a London Transit banner. It looks like a London Transit website. That stuff still needs to happen. So because I'm not a techie, I can't tell you how much work that is. I just know that Raven's going to be working through it to make sure that it works. With respect to providing information to people and having them trained and understand how to use it, we're using the information that we're getting back from the testing to create an FAQ as well, so that we can make sure that people are armed with all of the things, as many things as we can identify that they may struggle with, have difficulties with accessing the portal. What I said was, when we move into releasing it to not the test group and essentially the client group, it will be done in groups because we can't do it to everybody. So I as an example, maybe we'll do it by D's rider numbers or A through B, or however we'll do it in groups as it goes. But it also makes sense for us to launch it to new registrants as they come on, simply because we provide them the information on how to use our system as they come in. So all of those things are kind of happening at one time. With the hopeful rollout somewhere in the near future. And again, I don't know how long the testing is going to take. Nothing significant has been identified at this point that could slow us down, but it's been a day, so I can't speak to that yet, and I wish that I could. Sorry, but I can't.
Any other comments or questions? Okay.
So like as we phase it out, I guess I'm just kind of Like I get, you don't wanna give a time frame, because obviously there's lots of unknowns that could come up and you want to be safe, so I get that. But as we start phasing it out, most likely we're gonna start seeing declines on the queue for the phone lines.
So through the chair, speaking to Pure Properties, there isn't a drastic decrease immediately. Properties seeing less than 10% after a year of their trips being requested online. And those were properties where it wasn't a request, it was they could book their trip. So I'm not sure where we're gonna come in there because ours are requests and they're waiting for a response still. I would suggest that we will see a reduction in the calls coming to the queue based on the fact that people can see their calls, they can see all of their trips, and they can cancel their trips on the portal. Currently, right now, they're calling into the booking line to cancel trips. So yes, I would suggest there will be a reduction there. Don't know how much of it will be associated with a reduction based on booking requests or trip booking requests. The other pieces, absolutely. So, hey, do I have a trip for Thursday? Because I forgot. They're not going to call us anymore. They can look on the portal. Or I need to cancel my trip tomorrow. What happens? Kelly mentioned earlier that, the no-show piece with the trip notifications, we've seen some changes because people didn't forget about the trip anymore. Well, at 6 o'clock at night, each night, hour ago, those started going out for tomorrow. I can tell you that our phones have been very busy from 6 until now because people are calling and saying, I want to cancel my trip for tomorrow because they're getting the reminder tonight. That stuff may be reduced with the portal.
Just as a follow-up to that, I'm assuming that also means then that you're able to offer more same-day trips. If they, like, are you fine, like, do you keep stats for that? So I think if a bunch of people suddenly realize, oh, I don't need to ride tomorrow when they get the reminder, those trips open up the next morning, and are you able to fill them?
So through the chair, yes and no, because on the day before, we still have an unaccommodated board. In which case, then the system, when the batcher runs, will fill those trips for the unaccommodated board. So it can create more openings for trips, not necessarily same day. They could be filled the night before as well.
But it just,
There still is some space for same days, as there always has been, but there's a lot less. I mean, we booked 1,000 trips in December on a Wednesday, and we booked 1,235 today. It's a lot.
one further question. The report on this, the specialized service update in January, the very last thing says that that there was going to be an update on an assessment in the February 26th meeting. That it says administration continues to work with the contractor to address these concerns and is undertaking an assessment of other options that may be considered going forward to ensure that the budgeted hours are able to be delivered. An update on this assessment will be provided at the February 26th meeting. I don't see that report, and I assume what that was going to be was when Roygo fails us, what's plan B? So I'm wondering if that report is coming.
So through the chair, the experience with Roygo since we had that meeting drastically improved, which has impacted that. I would suggest that you continue to consider all options in the event that they're not meeting this.
Okay, any other comments or questions or discussion? All right, I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor, Toronto?
Okay, Mr. Butler. Favorite report, road construction update.
Thank you. And through the chair, staff report number 8 is the latest update for you on the ongoing construction throughout the city. Generally, you will see no significant changes from our last report that was taken in January. Some of the things we continue to monitor the ongoing installation of the rapid transit stations along King Street. We do plan to commence use of the King Street Conflict Road westbound lane at the end of April for Route 94 buses. If there are any delays in that construction, those will be reviewed for potential for any detours. The eastbound link phase 3B work has slowly started on the bridge at Highbury. So far, minimal impact, but that will grow and maybe in the future we'll hopefully have more there. And just note that the routes 22 and 94 are currently detours for the Madison Waterloo intersection closure. That work's expected to wrap up in about 3 weeks and we can return to the route. Those are just the highlights for you. Questions?
Okay, so first we move over to seconded by Commissioner Claire, thank you, seconded by Commissioner Little. Okay, any discussion?
Just one quick question with Douglas and Marty, is that on schedule? Just with given all the snow that we've had?
Yeah, last update we heard, yeah, that's for Shell Canada.
Any other comments or questions? So I think we're writing about that. Okay, all those in favor to notify them? Okay, so this is our add-on item. This is back to you, Ms. Flashney. This is staff report number 9 and our last staff report of the evening. This is the assessment growth business case.
Thank you. As the report indicates, this report has been added to this evening's agenda in light of commentary by a number of councillors at SPPC yesterday expressing disappointment in LTC not submitting an assessment growth business case for 2025. The report is intended to clarify the basis for the decision to not seek assessment growth in 2025. The report recommendation is to direct administration prepare a letter from the chair to council based on this report, which will in turn provide clarity to members of council with respect to why those decisions were made. As expressed in the 2025 budget report, and again in this report, the criteria for assessment growth funding is set out in City of London policy, places significant limitations on the types of service growth that could be funded through the assessment growth business cases. Finally, notwithstanding the challenges identified in the report, administration will endeavor to identify potential service improvements that may qualify for assessment growth funding as part of the 2026 budget process. These options will be presented to the Commission for consideration, including the data that administration is able to collect to support any business cases that will go forward, as well as the anticipated outlay of funds, noting the current delivery schedule for new buses will impact assessment growth business cases, as I've set out in this report. If we would have gone forward with a business case in 2025 and got approval essentially yesterday to proceed, we would order the bus or buses required for that. We're 18 months down the road before we have a bus, and now that assessment growth operating funding is going to be sitting there for 2 years going unutilized, which will result in criticism from council that we're not utilizing the funding that they're providing us. So it's hoped that this explanation will provide some clarity for members of council with respect to what it takes in terms from the time a budget's approved to actually implement that service, especially when it requires expansion buses. With that, I think it's to answer the questions.
Okay, so this one is actually a recommendation. So I need a mover and a seconder on the recommendation, which is that the commission direct administration to prepare a communication to municipal council based on the information that I mover, Councilor Burra, I'll get that right someday, thank you, and Commissioner Little. Okay, any discussion on this one, Councilor Burra?
Nothing has changed from our previous position on why what we see our issues or what we see with assessment growth from before to now. That's what I remember from the last conversation.
No, and I mean, I've provided an excerpt here, and in the report, you've also got the entire policy, but I mean, I would challenge anyone. I mean, I know during the deliberation, option 5 was raised by civic administration that the commission could consider seeking funding for operating or one-time capital costs related to pressures of a growing city, supported by appropriate metrics. However, if you look at the very next clause, it says for greater clarity, the following requests will not be eligible for assessment growth funding. And the third bullet is requests related to the enhancement or expansion of existing service levels, i.e. service improvement. So I don't know how or where members of council are getting the impression that we can submit a business case that will be approved based on these guidelines to put in frequency improvements or things of that nature, which is what has been identified in the commission's 5-year plan as priorities. No. So to answer your question, no, nothing has changed unless the commission would like to look at putting services in to brand new developments, noting there are all kinds of developments in the city that don't have conventional transit service access right now, but also don't qualify because they're not classified as a new development anymore. when we continue to have the pressures that we have on our existing service network. So those are really the options.
Can I ask a question to that too, but wouldn't that also to be excluded pursuant to it's not, you can't have a permanent source of funding? Because if we made
Assessment growth is permanent.
is a permanent source of funding, so if we did do a new service route, it would be. Okay, any other comments or questions on this? Or sorry, Commissioner Fire.
So I guess my question, just how do we socialize this with our friends at the city? Like, are we seeing them having dialogue and saying, hey, the 28, the 90, they're up for improvement? And like, do we kind of have a squint test in terms of, you know, riders that may be on the 90 that could come from an or underserved area? How's that adjudicated? Is really, I guess, my question. To get to, you know, whether it's ruled in or ruled out, and what I would see to be an apparent contradiction in their clauses of the policy.
So as part of the lead up to the 2025 budget, we did have discussions with civic administration. With respect to whether or not any of the service improvements we were contemplating could potentially attract assessment growth.
Right, and that answer, sorry to interrupt, that answer was.
That answer was, well, I mean, let me finish. So that answer was, if we look specifically to the frequency improvements that we were making on the two routes, if we could come up with a metric that could prove that the crowding on those routes was a direct result of infill development along those routes, and those people having moved into that infill relying on the bus, then it may qualify. Unfortunately, there is no way for us to prove, well, we looked at it and we didn't necessarily identify infill development that along those specific routes that would even qualify. But even if there was, the most specific metric we could come up with would be the number of boardings at a particular stop. But just because David's getting on a stop at XYZ doesn't mean he lives in one of the residential locations that is close to that stop. So for us to be able to prove that is next to impossible.
Right. And then everything just gets graded, puts in the hopper, and then.
Essentially, yes. So essentially, the way the business, like the way the assessment growth process works is we could still put forth a business case that may not have any metrics that support, and it would be up to civic administration to weigh that case against all of the other cases. But in that consultation, the advice to them was, you're going to need to be able to demonstrate that this is directly tied to infill growth if you want it to, you know, to be reasonably considered.
And to remind, this is a delegated decision to administration. It's not, it doesn't come to council for approval.
Comes to council as a no.
As a no topic.
Councilor Burke.
So that's why I didn't really make any comments, because I didn't make any comments, I didn't know if something changed or anything like that, so. So it's good that we're sending that report to council, and just kind of to clarify that, hoping that will kind of just allow us, you know. I see the real issue is that like direct kind of increase on maybe the infill or the intensification or whatever it is, and that's that language, the direct. It doesn't seem like we can be a little more broad on how we kind of, you know, do the assessment growth. It doesn't seem like, it feels like we're really locked up by the language in the policy itself. So that's kind of, as long as I guess whatever comes to the administration kind of really like points that out, hoping that will kind of clarify things.
So the intent of the letter is to go to municipal council, not civic administration.
Sorry, yeah.
And remind council that this is council's policy. So it's council that approved these parameters that civic administration is following. So if council wants things to be considered differently, that would be a decision of council. That's not up to the commission to say, you know, we don't like X, Y, and Z, and that's a council decision. You know, this policy was essentially approved by council.
The assessment, the full policy of the assessment growth policy was not listed in the report. There was little sections that were put into it.
No, it was attached to the enclosure.
Oh, no, I mean, for the SPPC.
Oh, for SPPC, maybe not.
Yeah. the assessment group, they did kind of talk about, the priorities and then on any type of surplus and that kind of how like remaining money, I should say, how they. Any type of extra money, how that gets, what goes to priority spending and then the surplus money gets divided out between infrastructure gap and not that, but that's all they kind of said, so. I guess there's going to be a report, that kind of area is highlighted, maybe we can have that.
Any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor of the recommendation? Any opposition? All right, so carried. So that takes us to the end of our staff reports. Our next meeting date is March 26th, 5:00 p.m. In the seconder to. Seconded by Commissioner. Thank you.
Yep.